Hi, it's Chef Tim Franks from Groen CapKold. I want to show you our control panel. This is a triple control panel. It controls 3 kettles and it also monitors up to 12 different channels for temperature. So when you come to the control panel every day, you're really coming up to it and looking for the navigate button. There's a language button, but it's preset for English and Spanish. We'll just leave it on English. There's a setting button and a navigate button. And so we'll come back to the setting button in a bit to see what's in the background. But when we come to our main screen every morning, we're primarily coming up looking for navigate, and it's going to show us our equipment list and our 3 kettles. So we've got 3 kettles. Each one has its own screen. So these are pop-up screens. And if you notice down here, we've got K2 and K3. Well, that's the center kettle on 2, and then on K3 is the 3rd kettle. We've got a couple little spots you want to watch. Right here is 3, and here's kettle 3. So remember the screen you're on. If you're not on that proper screen and you don't want to use those buttons, come back to navigate and then pick the kettle that you're working on so we can operate and not mix up the 3 kettles. So let's go through this panel really quickly. So at navigate, we have a pasta kettle. We have 2 agitated regular Cookchill kettles. And when we go to the pasta kettle, we're going to open this up. It gives us controls, once again for language, which we're just going to skip. You just leave it closed. Cooking controls. See how these windows pop up? And then recording controls, or being able to label our batches. And then we also have a recipe folder, which you can have your recipes in here or other data, including these videos. We could place them right here. This is a 300-word document or 300-page document of recipes now. They came off the internet from Groen CapKold's recipes, but you can load this spot with anything you want. So we can put in here training manuals or your recipes so you can grab them out of Flash and have them on your screen when you need them. So that recipe document is closed just like a regular computer. As you notice, I'm hitting the red X. At that point, we're moving down the screen. When we talk about recording, we're really talking about setting data, time and temperature, and then labeling it with marinara or pizza sauce or chicken noodle soup or something like that. So our trends are really our charts. So coming back to that button, trend is really our charts. Then there's that navigate button to go back to the screen where all the kettles are at. And then we move over here, we have Faucet Fill. And so for this point of Faucet Fill, we've got a couple things we have to really look at. We've got here hot and cold, and it does work actively. So in the middle of filling, you could switch from hot to cold. We've got manual fill and we've got auto fill. And so manual fill gives us that ability to just tap, it'll fill for as long as your finger is on the button. Auto, we can set these and forget them. So at this point, set it for, say, 90 gallons, hit the button, it'll automatically put in 90 gallons. And there's a wonderful counter down below that'll tell us where we're at in case we need to stop or something happened. So in the middle, we could adjust a recipe if needed by looking at that counter or seeing where you're at. We'll come back to that when we start getting into the cooking phase. And then on our controls for cooking, we've got here cook control for cook, on and off. That's really simple, on and off, but it does activate a few things. So we're going to start going through this one at a time. So here is our cook control. Watch over here as I hit this button. There's steam in our condensate. We need to let that water or condensate out of the steam. When the steam is with no water, it's actually hotter. Now that the water is out of the steam, we're going to heat much faster. And then our kettle is actually going to start to heat with 2 different valves. So as we're heating, we're going to move down from our cooking set point to our cook simmer valve. If you notice, when we're cooking, our cook valve has 2 valves on, 2 sources of steam. And when we go to simmer, it eliminates one of those sources. So we have less steam, so we won't overshoot our temperature. So really this cook and cook valve really work integrated together. So when you start cooking, realize if you're on simmer or on cook. I always start on cook. If I'm doing a gravy that I want to just simmer, I might bring it to a boil and then hit simmer, set it to about 190 degrees for like 30 minutes. So that's a great button to know and helps you with your cooking. We also have a cooling button in this system. The cooling water is not installed, so that's something that would cool down your kettle for cleaning mostly. We also have a timer. This is a great little tool. You can set the timer to the temperature, and at that point we've got it set to 155 degrees. At 155 degrees, when the kettle gets to that temperature, it's actually going to start the timer. So we can use the simmer or the set point for cooking and walk away as our temperature is rising. Whenever it gets to the set point temperature, our timer will start. And so both of these are pretty simple, almost like a calculator. So you can come in here and take this to 125, hit the check, and then we've got our set point at 125. We hit the button for the timer, and that's now activated. As we come up and hit 125, that timer will start. Now we have it on 2 minutes. Let's change that a bit. So maybe just take it down to simmering for 5 minutes, hit the check, and now when it hits that temperature, our buzzer will go off 5 minutes after. So it's a great way to work a recipe. If you just have to bring it to a boil and then you want to do some simmering, you can totally time it out and walk away and come back. The buzzer is quite loud and should be able to be heard for about 50 feet away. Now this is the pasta kettle. As I'm moving my way down, there's a wash valve. So in the bottom of our pasta kettle, there is a fresh water source coming up in. So potable fresh water is coming in and is actually rinsing off the pasta. So that wash valve really only needs to be turned on when the basket's in place and our pasta kettle is cooling pasta. So it's actually rinsing the pasta, stirring it a little bit, and cooling it at the same time. So this is our cooking control button. So we've kind of gone through all of those. Moving our way down, when you start cooking, don't forget to start your batch. So we have batch recording as well. Batch recording really is labeling your time and temperature chart for trends. Remember, trends are just charts, but now we can put a name on it. So if you want to go to, something like mac and cheese, you might have a space in there, and then you can do it as short or as long as you want. And at that point, I hit the check button, it goes right in there. But what if it's something special? All the rest of these are down here. It could be a kosher meal. It could be a low sodium meal. You could actually have this going to a certain building. You can label all of that into these little data spots. And so every one of those are open, but it might be just as simple as marinara or pizza sauce. So you don't have to do that full labeling. But sometimes, this is very, very helpful for immune deficient locations. We have to feed certain people to have it registered food safe. So hitting the check button and closing that out. At that point, remember, all these windows just pop up and they go down. So when we start our cooking batch, we actually want to start the batch running. So if you see at this point, the green button is on and you're in the pasta kettle, and then we start cooking, and I'll just turn it off because we're doing video. We're now recording that, and every bit of that temperature rise and fall over time for what is labeled is going to be recorded. And then it's going to go into a chart, a format like this. There is adjustability here, just like a computer. Remember, this is Windows 10. You have that ability with a mouse to go in here and change these time settings. So we can stretch them out or shrink them. You can do it with your finger, but I recommend using a mouse. It's a little bit easier, for the size of this. At that point, we have one kettle cooking, recording. We've got our trends. Let's go over our faucets. I'm going to move to a different kettle. Faucet Fill. Now, there's a water, hot and cold. As you can see, it's pretty simple to go back and forth. There's a manual and auto. Auto is what we're going to set up here. Manual, when I hit manual fill, it just fills the kettle when I touch that button. So you have a little bit of ability to check your water or just to give a quick rinse. On auto, whatever you set into the fill set point in gallons, it's going to fill. And there's a total mark down below. So the total amount and your fill set point are different. You want to make sure you hit the reset to zero out our water total. So as we start to go in here, let's just show you, it's a little different than the calculator for temperature. It's got double buttons for up and a single button for up, and same for down. So I'm just going to take this down really quickly to zero with the double button, but I'm only going to take the single button and just take it up a little bit to 2 gallons. So we're set at 2 gallons. I'm going to hit enter. I'm on hot water. I'm going to switch it to cold. Remember, we already set 2 gallons, and our set point, or our total, has been zeroed out. So now when I hit fill, I'm going to be able to measure exactly 2 gallons into that kettle, or 100 gallons, whatever the process or the recipe needs. If I really wanted to change it from hot to cold, I actually do have the ability to do that on the fly. So it goes right back and forth, hot to cold, while you're measuring. Works pretty good. So remembering, this is your cooking, this is where you're at most of the time, but you can also do a little bit different. The pasta kettle does not have an agitator, but the other 2 kettles do. We have an agitator control that goes from 10 to 100%. So at 100% full speed, we're going to turn on that agitator, and the button actually says started. At this point, I can stop it here, or I can stop it at the kettle. And so the good thing about this, when we stop it at the kettle, you cannot turn it on at the kettle. You have to walk away and start it at the control panel for safety reasons. So at this point, we can stop that. And let me show you the differences. We're going to go down to 10%. And then we're going to start that again. So we really could take it really slow in case you wanted to melt butter or make a roux and start to go a really slow cook. And there's no reason for a high agitator. You could put a massive amount of flour, butter, or oil and make a nice 20, 30 gallons of roux at this point, and then take that roux, put it in the cooler and use it as needed. Roux also might be something that could be tilted and poured out the front. I'm going to head and stop that. So agitator could be whatever you want to do. Rule of thumb for me is thin products you agitate at full speed. Thick products you agitate about 50%. So that means chicken noodle soup, agitating, the chicken's going to sit on the bottom and the noodles are going to float. Full agitation, they're going to come together. It'll pull the noodles down, it'll pull the meat up. So full agitation is the best to have a suspended product, have even dispersion of particulates or chunks throughout your bags. Taco meat, something that's really more meaty than liquidy, you might want to turn the agitator to 50%. That product's not moving fast enough, so you just kind of want to slow it down a bit. And it'll flow a little bit easier because of its thickness. So that's the main cooking part of the control panel. We'll go to the background stage. So I'm going to go to navigate again. And this is almost the first screen, but there's that main screen button that popped up. Here's our main screen. In the background, which you don't really need to do very often, maybe at the end of the day, we have the information here. I'm going to really state that everything up above is for calibration. And over here are tools for software. Both of these are really for calibration. So we don't really need to get in here for any reason. It's been calibrated and hopefully it's going to stay calibrated. Now, we can go back to our main screen and we have a few more settings, but really this is the meat of what we need to do. We do have help manuals here. So the actual operation manuals are going to pop up, and we have little folders for all the equipment manuals, and we even have the electrical drawings, and everything for this job is actually right here on this computer. It can be pulled out with a flash drive when needed, especially when you want to go into the folder for manuals. So here's our pump manual. We can open that up all the way. And if you're looking for gaskets or O-rings, you can go to the back page. You can find the parts list, and you can find everything you need to know about the pump fill right here in the control panel. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. And so here's our little windows. Once again, this is connected to our USB port. You can take a flash drive and remove this entire folder or manual and take it to your desktop or use it somewhere else. And you also can add to this if needed. If you bring new pieces of equipment into the kitchen, there's no reason you can't just throw a manual in here to help you out. Now remember, there are two different folders here. The open recipe folder, it's really on the front side, so you can get to the recipe folder without going into the background. So here's just recipes. So I really invite you to add your recipes to that front folder. And then in the back folder, what you have to do, passcode to get into, that's where these charts are going when we start and stop our recordings. And then each chart is really going to an individual piece. So Kettle 1 has its own file, Kettle 2 has its own file, Kettle 3 has its own file. As we go into there, now how you label will pop up first, but the date automatically comes into play. So really you can just write it out, but we've got a lot of beef taco meat here and then chicken taco meat and repetitive dates. And so everything is divided up and works very well. This is, once again, Windows 10, operates just like your home computer. And you do not have to use your finger, you can use a mouse. I like to run the mouse over here on the side, but it's really a touch screen, so if you can tap it, it should open up just fine. All right, we'll close that window. And then finally, to get this data off of here, we've got a button where we take a flash drive and insert it, and at that point we hit this button. It'll take all the data that was taken from the last time and take everything from that forward. So if you want to collect data every Friday, you come up here and put the flash drive in, hit that button, it'll simply give you the data from last Friday, but it's not erasing it. It's all still in here. It should have enough data space for 3 or 4 years before it starts to rewrite over itself. But the reason this is a closed window is you actually can get in here. These are open files, and if you X them, they will delete. So it is really just like your computer. Leave those files in here, take them out when you want, but you can go back as long as they're still in there and retrieve them later if you need to. But primarily, once you get them out, you don't need them. It will write over itself after a few years. That's pretty much our entire control panel. Just a quick back to the front. Remember, you always want to go to navigate, and here's our 3 kettles. And then the very last thing, we are monitoring temperatures throughout the room. We have 3 temperatures shown on our kettles, but on the recorder button, we also have open channels so we can plug something into. In this choice, number 1 is our product chiller. Number 2 is actually the meat probe that goes with the water probe for the water jet. So these temperatures both together on the same device, but primarily that meat probe is an internal temperature that goes through a sous vide tape that's not going to let water in, and you get internal temperatures of a roast or certain proteins. The rest of these channels are not being used, but at any time they can be used or wired into a RTD temperature sensor thermometer, which could be your freezer, your walk-in. Your dedicated Cookchill walk-in is really what you should have, and that temperature of the walk-in could go here, and then when you pull your data, you can get all your temperatures for cooking, quick chilling, and cold holding. And that's your HACCP plan for cook, chill, and hold.